Recently, I was scrolling through old pictures, and I found a picture from when I was a little kid. I took the picture and held it up to my face in front of a mirror, and I realized, wow, I look nothing like that kid in the picture. We don't have the same physical properties, our thoughts, ideas, and beliefs are different, and we certainly don't have the same memories. But still, I know it's me. My brain sees the picture and creates a storyline that I was there, I am here, and I'll be somewhere else in the future, looking back doing the same exact thing. This is the idea of self, the idea that there's something deep within us that remains fundamentally the same even when everything else changes. It's the idea that we can grow bigger, create new memories, lose old memories, change our thoughts and beliefs, but deep down, there's still something that remains fundamentally unchanged. The idea of self is one that has baffled pretty much everyone, scientists and philosophers alike, for centuries. Because as easy as it is to describe, understanding why or how it works sits on the opposite end of the spectrum. As humans, we experience a lot of different senses. We feel things, we see things, and we hear things. We have thoughts, we have feelings, and we have the ability to learn new things. But all of these things are separate experiences. So, at what point do all of these sentient properties become you? As I continued scrolling through the photos, I came across pictures from elementary, middle school, high school, and everything after. All of these photos looked completely different. When I think back to those times and the decisions I made, I would never make most of them right now. Yet, without a shadow of a doubt, my brain convinces me that I am still me. The words I and me are more than just pronouns. They are the two ways we describe self. When we say I, we talk about a being who is consciously aware of the present moment. So, I am reading this line on a script right now. On the other hand, when we describe self using the word me, we're usually referring to a personal identity, who we think we are. Me usually reflects who we are through the lenses of our past, present, and plans for the future. But we color our memories based on what we need to be in the present, and our plans for the future are always changing. How can there be a consistent being if everything that forms it changes? We like to think of memories as simply playing back a video in our head of what happened in the past. But that's not what memories are. Memories are our brain's reconstruction of the past experiences. We create these memories to fit the present narrative based on what we know now, how we describe me now, as well as our present needs and goals. So if you now think of yourself as a kind person, you're more likely to remember all the times you've been kind to people, rather than the times you've been unkind. We form narratives about ourselves around how we want to be seen by others. We convince ourselves that we'll act and behave a certain way to fit that narrative, even when we're often mistaken. If this is true and we can't trust our memories to give an accurate description of who we were in the past, then how can we have a self that exists through time? Aren't we just creating new selves every time this narrative completely changes? Think about it. It's not that the narrative continues down a different path, it changes completely such that what was no longer is. And if what was can no longer be, then we cannot say that there is a self that persists through time. Rather, the idea of self is one that is constantly recreated by our brains when the need arises. This is what we refer to as the illusion of self. Contrary to what you might be thinking, this does not mean that we don't have a self. It simply means that it does not exist the way we think it does. Our bodies are made up of a bundle of perceptions, sensations, and thoughts. Our brains try to make sense of the randomized nature of our being by creating a linear storyline. You were there, now you're here. It is this storyline of sorts that we describe as self. It's just the brain's way of making sense of the randomness that is human existence. This is why the idea of self that we have now cannot be true. When most people think of a self, they think of something that can exist outside of the brain. But that's just not possible. The self is a sensation of continuity and unity of self that is created by the brain. Anything other than this is just wishful thinking that humans are more than just a sentient bunch of molecules. The idea that deep down we have a soul, an immaterial essence, the driving force of individual existence. And in most religions of the world, this is true. But not Buddhism. Anatta is the Buddhist doctrine that teaches against the idea of a self. It teaches that there's no underlying permanent substance, there's no soul. Rather, everything we experience is simply perceived by our senses, not by I or me. It teaches that since there is no I, material wealth can't belong to me. So we shouldn't crave these things or hold on to them like they're worth more than just a few good sensations. Dropping all the other pictures I was flipping through, I picked up the picture from when I was a kid again. I held it in front of my face and stared at the mirror again. And as the existential crisis flooded my mind, I couldn't help but ask, if I wasn't told that that was me, would I have known? If I had seen this picture randomly without any context, would I have been able to tell that it was me? Definitely not. So then how can I say that there's a self that existed in that kid that still exists in me? How can I say our experiences are linear, that we're the same person? The truth is, you're not the same person that existed before, and you're not the same person that will exist in the future. Or at least there's no evidence to prove it. This thought is both terrifying and exciting. It's terrifying because it's fundamentally against everything we know about ourselves. If there's no self, then there's no self-will. And if there's no self-will, there's no morality. There's no right or wrong, good or evil, just a bunch of molecules interacting to the stimuli they're presented with. But on the other hand, it is exciting because it liberates you. Now you don't have to think, it's me against the world, because there is no you to begin with. You'll no longer think life is unfair because bad things happen to you. You'll see bad things happening to you simply as things just happening. Whether it's good or bad, it doesn't really matter, does it? You'll no longer be scared of death, because nothing can die that never was. You'll understand that death is simply a natural occurrence. The illusion of self is one of the most powerful and consistent illusions we experience. It's there right from when we're toddlers up until the day we die. If it isn't real, then why do our brains create these storylines? Why does this illusion exist? As living things, our goal is to survive and thrive. We learn, adapt, we grow. And one of the most important building blocks of survival is competition. Without competition, we'll all be satisfied with where we are and have no desire to strive for anything at all. Without the illusion of self, there is no competition. Competition is built on the idea of a single entity outdoing another. If there is no single entity and just sentient chemical reactions, there will be no competition. And without competition, things just don't really work the way they do now. If you're still not convinced that the need for competition alone is the reason our brains make up the idea of a unified and persistent being in all of us, you're not alone. Not everyone believes in the idea of a lack of self. Some people who meditate can sometimes get to a state of complete quietness and emptiness, described as a pure consciousness event. This is an empty state of consciousness. There are no thoughts, no technical mental processes going, just a deep-seated sense of I-ness, an independent identity. Many people use this state as an argument for the existence of self, but there are two things wrong with this school of thought. One, there is no scientific evidence to back it up. We cannot determine what is what simply by judging based on people's personal experiences, unfortunately. Two, the feeling of emptiness is a mental process. That in itself is your brain telling you that you're free of thoughts. It's still a brain activity. Some people argue that if there is no self, then how can we trust the judgments of anyone? If a ghost came out today to tell us that there are no ghosts, how do we believe them? For you to be able to pass judgment on consciousness, you need to be an objective observer. But being an objective observer means you need to have a self who observes all, like you're a god or something. So that negates almost every argument you're trying to defend. But in truth, the illusion of self is not a ghost telling us that there are no ghosts. It's a figure that we call a ghost telling us that they can feel, touch, and smell. They can interact with living things, so they cannot be ghosts. It's not just postulating the absence of a self, it's showing the reality of its absence through scientific research. We don't need a self to tell us there is no self. We only need the evidence. And the evidence is clear when I hold up the picture of when I was a kid to my face. It's clear that everything has changed. I know I am still causally related to who that kid was, but there is no evidence to prove that there's something in that kid that is still in me that has persisted through time. At this point, I was having an existential crisis, so I put down my own pictures and picked up the pictures of my grandma. She's much older now. She doesn't really speak much, but she still talks. She still remembers what the world was like when she was younger. But what about people her age who suffer from advanced Alzheimer's? People who can't recognize their own loved ones, who can't remember anything from the past. Do they still have a self? When does a person stop being a self? If you no longer have any memories of the past or plans for the future, what then is self? What does the word me refer to? If the very components that make the self can easily be altered or wiped away completely, then the idea of a persistent existence through time is not possible. Only when we disregard the idea of self can we begin to understand why people seem to go completely off script. We often judge people by the idea of them we've created in our head, when in reality, we're all just a bunch of competing impulses and urges, swaying us one way and then the other. The idea that there is no self that exists through time explains why we sometimes act in ways that are inconsistent with the story we tell both to ourselves and to others. The truth is, the illusion of self is simply a collection of our memories of the past, desires in the present, and plans for the future. It's our psychological profile. It's not a supernatural entity that exists independently. It does not transcend death. It does not exist through time. We were not, and we won't be. We simply are. These are the words of one Albert Einstein. His love for music is well documented. There are many pictures of him indulging himself in the tunes of his violin, seemingly oblivious to the rest of the world. As anyone who has ever loved music would know, our musical tastes have a lot to do with what we think, and who we are. Of course, on first read, Einstein's account sounds nothing more than a metaphor for visualization. But could it be more? Could someone possibly see music? Could there be anything more to the conscious experience? In 1812, a physician by the name of George Tobias Ludwig Sachs was writing about the nature of albinism, having the condition himself. Color was a recurring topic in his analysis of albinism, and as such, in discussing his own experience, he mentioned that colored ideas appeared to him. They were intimate and recurring, and couldn't be reckoned with usual sight, according to Sachs. Sachs is now regarded as the first medically documented case of synesthesia, a neurological condition in which a sensation in one of the senses evokes a sensation in another. The term quite literally means a cross-mingling of the senses, exactly opposite to the more familiar word anesthesia, which means no sensation. This cross-mingling could theoretically happen between any two, or even more, senses. It's no wonder then that there are more than 80 types of synesthesia known till now. Sachs himself seemingly had multiple forms of synesthesia, reporting that numbers, days of the week, time periods, letters, notes of music, all of these elements adopt those colors. These introduce themselves to the mind as if a series of visible objects in dark space, formless and noticeably of different colors. This is most likely a case of ordinal linguistic personification, where, as the name suggests, ordered sequences tend to have personalities and colors to each element of the sequence. This type of synesthesia tends to co-occur with grapheme color synesthesia, the most common form of synesthesia where numbers are associated with colors. There are many other types of synesthesia, such as lexical gustatory synesthesia, where hearing certain words causes certain tastes, or audio-tactile synesthesia, where hearing certain sounds can lead to a sensation of touch in parts of the body. Oddly enough, there's even a type of synesthesia where swimmers thinking, watching, or performing a certain swimming stroke perceive a color that they consistently associate with that swimming stroke. There have also been surgeons with what's called mirror touch synesthesia, where they're able to feel the pain of the patients they're observing while CPR was being administered. I have died many times, says Dr. Joel Salinas, a neurologist who possesses this condition. However, the most awe-inspiring case of synesthesia probably took place when a man was able to visualize colors when he saw numbers. The only catch is, he was colorblind, and the colors he was visualizing had never been seen. But how credible are these accounts? Considering Sachs' colorful landscape was also attributed by some to congenital eye defects common in people with albinism, couldn't all these just be hallucinations or simply psychedelic experiences under the influence of a drug or some other sign of an overreaction? The science is very clear on that front. While synesthesia-like experiences have been created with the help of psychedelic drugs, synesthesia is a consistently reproduced condition, meaning those that have it will recall the same exact colors, the same exact tastes, the same exact sensations with nearly 90% plus accuracy, even when they're tested years apart and without warning. This pattern of consistent experiences has so far been the most reliable way to test whether someone has synesthesia or not. Mind you, consistency here does not mean that the same letter will always be correlated with the same color for all synesthetes, people who have synesthesia. Individual to individual, these correlations may vary, even if they may have the same type of synesthesia. But for the same individual, the correlation stays remarkably precise. So precise, in fact, that they can tell apart shades of color that are only slightly different. So, if the letter A is an orangish red for you, it may not be the same for another synesthete, but it will always be orangish red for you. This quality is also why the musical synesthetes tend to have perfect pitch, because they can superimpose the sound with a very intricate visual map and confirm what is what. Synesthetes also score higher on memory tests, especially with numbers and names, because they're most remembered as multi-property objects, each with unique associations. Perhaps the most compelling evidence that synesthesia is not an occasional random hallucination is the fact that the brains of synesthetes are physically different from those that are not. Synesthetes display consistently higher connectivity in their brains than non-synesthetes, especially in between visual and auditory regions. The visual regions were also better connected to the frontoparietal region, a region crucial for color association with numbers or letters. The amount of connectedness also reflected the strength of the synesthetic experience. The stronger the connections, the stronger the synesthetic experience. Research has also revealed that synesthetes generally have more white matter. This intrinsic, increased network connectivity led scientists to agree that there is a genetic component to synesthesia. And sure enough, about 40% of all synesthetes have a first-degree relative with synesthesia, and many synesthetes recall having synesthesia as long as they can remember. An interesting way to test whether you might have a grapheme color synesthesia, which is number to color synesthesia, is to look at this picture. Try to identify the twos as quickly as you can. People who have synesthesia react quicker on a test like this, because the 2s and 5s are naturally seen in different colors to them like this, which makes it much easier to identify. They are able to see the 2s in different colors without necessarily having to hunt for them like non-synesthetes. So they're not staring at a number and then thinking of the associated color. It's an automatic response, one synesthetes cannot turn off. And that can be a problem, right? Even with the 5 senses most of us are able to use, sometimes we feel overwhelmed by the world around us. So to be overstimulated all the time with a barrage of sensory inputs would be pretty uncomfortable. Or so you would think. Synesthetes, by and large, consider their abilities as gifts rather than curses. Most synesthetes are completely unaware that others don't see the world the way they do. For some, sound has always had color, color has always had taste, and taste has always had sound. It sounds strange, but you'd be surprised how many of your favorite artists are synesthetes. From musicians like Lord and Pharrell Williams, to novelists like Vladimir Nabokov, from theoretical physicists like Richard Feynman, to painters like Vincent van Gogh. All are said to have had synesthesia. Their conditions are as versatile as their crafts. Common amongst all, however, is the fact that their contributions have all been incredible feats of creativity. This convergence of creativity and synesthesia is no coincidence. In fact, synesthesia is up to 7 times more common in artists and people involved in creative professions. It's no surprise then that synesthetes perform better on tests of creativity and originality than the average person. But of course, as with any condition, it's not all sunshine and rainbows. Some kids who have the condition display poorer reading comprehension than their peers, and often have a hard time following lectures. Solomon Sharashevsky was a Russian journalist who was also diagnosed with the condition. He could recall unusually long lists of information without error, but said that the automatic and nearly permanent retention of every detail, due to synesthesia, made it very hard for him to grasp abstract concepts or make sense of what he was reading. Still,
Synesthesia is generally considered a positive, and most people that have it do not think of it as a disorder. It's staggering how the same world you and I experience can actually be so different compared to so many different people. I had no idea that such a condition existed before I was introduced to this tool just a few days ago. It allowed me to see what my name looks like to a synesthete. In her video, violinist, composer, and synesthete Caitlin Hova recalls finding out in college that not everyone saw music as she did. The prevalence of synesthetes within the general population is remarkably high, contrary to what it may seem. As many as 1 in 20 people can have some form of synesthesia, and you probably know a lot of them. You just don't know that you know them. But now you know that you don't know that you know them. You get the point? In what follows, Caitlin goes on to play an incredible piece on her violin to showcase what she sees when she plays it, which really makes me wonder how relatively colorless our realities are in comparison. Or are they? You see, we all visualize things. We may not see colors for every note on an instrument or have perfect pitch, but we do visualize. It happens all the time. When we're trying to process large amounts of data or trying our hand at more artistic ventures, we're trying to see something totally abstract. One of the more interesting studies regarding synesthesia is the Bouba-Kiki effect. Take a look at this image. Which one of the shapes looks like it's called Bouba and which one is called Kiki? An overwhelming majority of the initial participants chose the image on the right as Bouba and the left as Kiki, even across languages. Even children as young as 2.5 years old have demonstrated this effect. While these findings are not seen in every community, the consensus suggests that the Bouba-Kiki effect is a cue to pre-existing synesthesia-like associations present in all of us. It would reinforce the idea that the neural hyperconnectivity that is responsible for synesthesia is seen in pretty much all babies. Most of us simply lose those connections as we grow older, and that's the beauty and tragedy of synesthesia. All at once, that we all have it, but most of us lose it. Caitlin ends her video by asking what could have happened if we were all more conscious of others' experiences, and how different our senses might be from one another. How we solve a math problem, how we make sense of complex concepts, how we enjoy music. Sharing these things can make learning so much more fun. What does it mean to know you have the correct answer? She asks. What is that feeling? Is that feeling a color? As a student of the sciences, I find myself wondering, time and time again, how scientists realize some of their most mind-bending, unintuitive truths about the universe. How are they so confident in their findings? Aside from the degrees and credentials, what does it truly mean to know something? What is that feeling of harmony, that creative connection, and why does it soothe our hearts? Whether we can describe these things or not, you and I have felt them. Maybe in a painting, or in a ballad, or in a book. But we've all felt them. Answering these questions could help uncover the colors in our mundane but elegant reality, and allow us all to experience a richer consciousness, all whilst using an ability that, deep down, we all possess.
The human body is a powerful thing. We can smell the rain before it drops from the sky, hear the faintest sound of a child crying all the way across the house, feel the slightest differences in textures, and taste any object without ever touching it to our tongues. Still, you are more than just the body. The human body creates our experiences, but it doesn't define them. For that, we have to go deeper. We have to look at our thoughts. What are thoughts? Are they truly yours or just echoes of something else?
On the 23rd of March, 2016, Microsoft released a new chatbot named Tay on Twitter. Described by Microsoft as an experiment in conversational understanding, Tay was built to have conversations with people through tweets and DMs with the slang of the internet. In the words of its creators, Tay was meant to be, and I quote, Microsoft's AI fam from the internet that's got zero chill. I don't know. Tay was designed to learn more about human language as she interacted with people through their tweets. She was to learn the patterns of our communication and then emulate it when trying to create her own speech. Tay's first few tweets were fun and harmless. However, in just a few hours, everyone was in horror as Tay started tweeting the most offensive things imaginable. Things along the lines of, and again, I quote, Bush did 9/11, and Hitler would have done a better job. In just 16 hours, Tay tweeted 95,000 times, with the majority of her tweets being extremely abusive and offensive. In less than a day, Microsoft had to suspend the account and the entire experiment. A complete social failure if you ask me, but it did do its job the way it was programmed to do. Tay was not designed to think for herself. She was built to learn from the language that was spoken to her, and so when people recognized that she was nothing more than a parrot bot, they intentionally started tweeting the most insensitive and offensive things at her, tweets she echoed right back into the world. Sadly, many people today are like Tay. We constantly feed ourselves with the same type of information, and without pausing for a minute to verify what is fact and form an unbiased opinion. Many of us simply echo everything we think right back into the world. Although we like to think that every opinion we have and every decision we make is down to our own best judgment and independent assessment, that's simply not true. More often than not, our opinions, beliefs, views, and thoughts about the world are influenced by a larger group of people. Research has shown that when presented with multiple options, we often mimic the choice of the people around us. Rather than spending time researching, asking questions, or learning about the different options to find out the best one for us, we often defer to the social norm. This is how humans have always been. We are social animals after all. However, now more than ever, it's becoming more and more important to think for yourself. A few decades ago, we only had a handful of different thoughts that we were exposed to, so it was easy to filter all of them and figure out what was right for us. But thanks to the internet and social media, there are billions of people with completely different worldviews, ideologies, and beliefs, and the societal norm is changing so rapidly that there's no time to pause and think, wait, is this really right for me? If you're not subscribed to my channel, there's a high chance that the YouTube algorithm brought you here, and if that's the case, hi. You see, algorithms are great. They bring everything we want right to our doorsteps. But there's one big problem. Slowly, they're beginning to dictate our lives. They're starting to think for us. First, it's content-based platforms like YouTube and Netflix suggesting things to you to watch. Soon, you're watching everything not because you searched for it, but because the algorithm suggested it. And to a large extent, this looks harmless. It exposes you to content you otherwise might not have seen, and gives smaller creators the chance to blow up without having an established pedigree. It's literally the reason Aperture has grown to the size it's at today. But then you have Amazon's algorithm that tells you all the products you should add to your cart alongside the one purchase you made. Then Gmail Smart Reply telling you how to reply to emails, and Tinder telling you who you're supposed to spend the rest of your life with. Before you know it, we give the algorithm the driver's seat, and we become passengers in our own lives, merely coasting through the roads we are suggested. This in and of itself is a problem, but the fact that the algorithm is not perfect makes it an even bigger one. For one, the algorithms that are now thinking for us don't actually think. They simply find patterns and parrot them. Once they realize we like or agree with a certain thing, we are constantly fed with that one thing. And in a short while, we find ourselves in an echo chamber, where everything we see and hear are only things we've agreed with in the past. It doesn't give much room for change, for growth, for the opportunity to listen to opposing arguments and learn. Think about it. How many times have you randomly found a video on YouTube that you completely disagreed with? Compare that to how many times you found a video that you enjoyed and completely agreed with. The difference is probably incredible. And the better the algorithms become, the better they will be at serving you that information that you already agree with. This leads to confirmation bias, the tendency to search for, interpret, favor, and recall information in a way that confirms or supports your prior beliefs or values. Because these algorithms constantly surround us with ideas that we already agree with, we quickly block our minds to every shred of evidence that contradicts this bias. There's a subtle difference between the desire to have been right and the desire to be right. The desire to have been right prevents us from seeing the real truth, causing us to hold on to ideas that might be illogically and factually flawed. We fail to see how we're wrong, and so we fail to learn and grow. We hold on to beliefs that we have been surrounded by, so much so that we start to seek out evidence to back up our bias and not to find out the truth. The truth is that humans find it very difficult to process information in an unbiased and rational manner once they've developed strong feelings or sentiments about the issue. So people interpret everything they see in a way that already agrees with everything they know and believe about the world. Some people believe in something called extrasensory perception. So, for example, they remember all the times they were thinking about their mom and picked up their phone only to see that she was calling. It seems like fate in a way, but yet they forget all the times when mom called when they weren't thinking about her, and the other times when they were thinking about mom but she never called. Because they believe so strongly in extrasensory perception, they are far more likely to remember instances that back up their claims, even when the instances that don't agree with those claims occur far more frequently. To make our confirmation bias even worse, social media has created the influencer culture. People like me, apparently. Now, not only do we look to each other for guidance, we look to influencers, gurus, and thought leaders. Because we consider these people part of our packs, more so than traditional celebrities, we often place them on incredibly high pedestals, giving them the opportunity to, influence us. People buy a product because an influencer said so, even when the product might not be the best option for them. They employ unsafe dieting practices and workout routines just because an influencer said it'll work without doing the research for what works for their own body. People listen to fake gurus and influencers, and without taking the time to think for themselves, they do exactly what these people tell them to do, even if it's unhealthy and potentially dangerous. One of the biggest reasons people no longer seem to think for themselves is because they are scared of the repercussions. How can you think for yourself when sharing ideas that are not in accordance with the societal norm gets you exiled from society? When you could lose your job, your education, everything you've ever worked for, simply for thinking differently and expressing those different opinions. Yes, I'm talking about cancel culture. The real victims of cancel culture are the ideas that will be left unsaid, the thoughts left in the mind for fear of extreme backlash. It's the beliefs that are only expressed in the dark, where the big bright eyes of Big Brother cannot see. To prevent the rats from coming out, Big Brother urges you to double think. To prevent yourself from getting cancelled, a relatively new phenomenon, society urges you to groupthink. Coined by Irving Janis in 1972, groupthink simply means avoiding conflict by swiftly reaching an agreement without evaluating other options or alternative ideas. It means to bend your back to the societal norm without giving other ideas a second thought. The danger of this is that our individuality and uniqueness dies, and the world moves to a point where we all collectively agree on the same ideas. No difference in thought, no individual ideas, just groupthink. But it doesn't have to be this way. To think for yourself is a skill you must learn, else you become a puppet of someone else's programming. To think for yourself is to challenge your existing ideas, beliefs, and decisions. Ask yourself, are my thoughts mine? Or are they simply influenced by everyone around me? My friends, my parents, society, influencers, and so on. To think for yourself is to look at the evidence, to investigate and to use thoughtful analysis. Understand that all of us battle with confirmation bias. We all want to seem to fit in. And so remember to not shy away from ideas that might negate your existing bias. To think for yourself is to battle with your mind. Go out there and find the roots of the ideas you support, and then find opposing arguments. Look at your newfound beliefs as diamonds encased in a rock. Before you get to the fine jewel in the middle, you must break through the rock with a lot of force, but carefully and diligently. Before you fully accept a new way of thinking, make sure that you've broken through the rock by wrestling with these new ideas in a way that might take you out of your comfort zone. To think for yourself is to go out there in search of information. Don't wait for an algorithm to keep echoing the things you already know. Acquire new knowledge. Feed your mind continuously by reading, listening, and discussing these big new ideas with a view from both sides. Break your pattern of thought and view everything the world has to say through your own lenses. To think for yourself is to be humble in your knowledge. One of the reasons people fall into the trap of confirmation bias is that they don't want to be wrong. We've built this idea for some reason that we have to protect ourselves from being wrong. People seem to pride themselves as intellectuals and knowledgeable, and disconfirming evidence goes against that notion. So they shy away from it, keeping themselves in the dark about the truth, simply because they want to keep up the facade of being right. Don't be scared of being wrong. There's literally nothing wrong with it. Remember, we used to think that the Earth was the center of the universe and that everything revolved around us. We're egocentric. We enjoy feeling important, and being right gives us that sense of superiority. But, in my mind, I feel as if you should be more concerned about finding out what's right and not craving the state of being right. To think for yourself is to be courageous, to not buckle under fear, pressure, or guilt. To stand up for what you believe in, as long as you have come to see it as the truth for yourself. To think for yourself is standing out and not going along with the crowd simply for the sake of keeping the so-called peace and avoiding confrontation. Because the truth is, we would have no new scientific discovery if the old ideas were never challenged. Everything we believe about the world today is a product of someone thinking outside of the box, challenging the status quo. We must do the same. Being a free thinker opens the avenue to ideas that some of us may never truly experience. And new ideas are something we can all benefit from as individuals. There is no progress without change, and there is no change without admitting there's a problem in the first place.
Your brain lies to you every day, and you don't even know it. The human brain is powerful, there's no doubt about that, but it has its limitations. Your mind loves to simplify information, mainly for speed, and this results in cognitive bias. These biases help you make sense of the world and reach decisions more quickly, but it turns out that we're often sacrificing accuracy for this speedy advantage, and this can have some pretty significant effects, especially when we're all doing it at the same time. The way you remember something could be biased for any number of reasons, and that can lead to more biased thinking and decision making. But sometimes, cognitive biases are more related to problems with attention. Our capacity for attention is limited. Even the best of us have pretty slim attention spans, so we have to be selective about what we pay attention to in the world around us. There's plenty of different types of biases that affect decision making, and no one is immune. We all do it. It's a bit mind-bending, really. If you think about it hard enough, it calls into question the true nature of reality, because we're all just experiencing our own biased and subjective versions. It's easier to spot it in others, and by the way, that's blind spot bias. These biases are everywhere. Some everyday examples include only paying attention to news stories that confirm your opinions, or attributing other people's success to luck, but then taking personal credit for your own accomplishments. Yeah, we're all guilty. Most of us like to think that we're objective, logical, and capable of taking in and evaluating all the information that's available. But unfortunately, these biases more often than not trip us up, leading to poor decisions and then worse judgments. But how can we even tell? Is there any way around this problem? And why does our brain even like to lie to us in these ways? It all goes back to the issue of time. Think about it. If you had to think about every possible option when making a decision, it would take a ridiculous amount of time to make even the simplest of decisions. We wouldn't get anywhere quickly. We wouldn't get anywhere at all, really. So if you look at this another way, your brain is just doing you a huge favor. The complexity of the world and the amount of information available to us at any one time makes it vital to rely on some mental shortcuts, known as heuristics, so that you can take actions more quickly. Take an evolutionary example. If our earliest ancestors had taken the time to consider every bit of information when trying to escape wild animals, a lot of us might not be around today. Using heuristics in these kind of situations would have undoubtedly been helpful and accurate, and they still can be. But other things can get tangled up in these shortcuts, like emotions, individual motivations, and even simple things like your age. Decreased cognitive flexibility as people get older means that cognitive biases may increase too. As for knowing when our brain is telling us these lies, as I said, they're very hard to notice in ourselves. But for starters, it's useful to know what some of the biases that are messing with your decision-making processes are. You know, just so you can look out for them from time to time, but they'll probably still sneak by you anyway. We tend to rely too heavily on the first piece of information seen, and this is known as the anchoring bias. During decision-making, anchoring occurs when an initial piece of information is used to make subsequent judgments. Let me explain. So, setting a high price for, say, a used car makes all other negotiations seem cheaper and more reasonable. If your initial price is high, all the other cheaper cars make it seem like you're getting a deal, even though it's just your brain screwing with you. But you can avoid this bias. Now you know it exists. You can delay decisions and drop your own anchors, so you're setting the standard, not somebody else. Not only do we grab and hang on to the first piece of information we've been given, but we also way overestimate the importance of it. This is known as the availability heuristic, and is a mental shortcut that relies on the easiest example that comes to mind. If it's easier to remember, it must be either more important or more likely to happen again, right? This particular bias can lead to bad decision making, because bad memories that are easily recalled definitely don't provide enough information on their own for figuring out how likely things are to happen again in the future. The availability heuristic will often leave you with low quality information to form the basis of your decision, so you've been warned. What about other people? Well, they can definitely influence your decision making, even if you'd like to think that they don't. Most of the time, we can't resist the tendency to adopt a certain behavior, style, or attitude simply because everyone else is doing it. The more people that adopt a certain trend, the more likely it becomes that other people will also hop on the bandwagon. This is the bandwagon effect, and it explains trends in fashion, music, the rise and fall in popularity of various social network sites. The list goes on. Other people, and when I say other people, I mainly mean people trying to sell you things. They can also affect your decision making using choice supportive bias. This is the tendency to remember our choices as better than they actually were. We have this habit of over-attributing positive features to options we chose and negative features to options that we didn't choose. The thought process goes something like, I chose this option, so it must have been the better option. In a way, it's nice. We feel good about ourselves and our choices and have less regret for bad decisions. On the other hand, we could just be justifying bad choices to ourselves without even realizing it, which is less good. Our minds will even conjure illusions for us, like the tendency to see patterns in random events. The clustering illusion is yet another double-sided trick of the mind where we find patterns or shapes in random information, when in reality, no pattern exists. Our brain has been designed to identify patterns because it helps speed up the process of recognizing people and things and ultimately leads us to help make better decisions. But this same thing also makes us prone to type 1 errors, a false positive, which is what our brain does when there's really no discernible pattern. It just makes one up for us. Imagine how this affects things like stock market decisions and gambling, just for starters. Perhaps the most famous example of the clustering illusion in gambling happened during a game of roulette, when the ball fell black 26 times in a row. By the way, the probability of that happening 26 times in a row is 1 in 66 million. Gamblers lost millions betting against black. They were certain that a long streak of red was ahead. But that just isn't the case. The odds haven't changed at all. Another particularly problematic bias for society is the confirmation bias. As biases go, this is a pretty big one. In fact, it's been suggested that this bias, by itself, might account for a significant fraction of the disputes, altercations, and misunderstandings that occur amongst everyone. To put it simply, we're just looking for information that confirms what we already think, something that supports our existing personal beliefs and values. We pick out the pieces of data that make us feel good because, well, it feels good. The examples are endless and can be found literally anywhere. Social media, political orientation, social issues, climate change, religious beliefs, pretty much anything you can think of. We just stop looking for more information once we have enough to confirm our own beliefs. This, as you might expect, severely distorts our evidence-based decision-making, because once the decision has been made, apparently we can't help but look for more information that supports it. And if we do happen to come across information that conflicts with the choice, it's more often than not ignored or given just little consideration, simply because it makes us feel uncomfortable. This is pretty close to the ostrich effect, in which we often take the decision to just ignore dangerous or negative information by burying our heads in the sand. We just pretend it doesn't exist. For a change, let's look at a cognitive error that can have a profoundly positive impact, the placebo effect. This one is particularly fascinating. Pretty much everyone has an idea of what it is, but not everyone is aware of exactly how powerful this effect can be. In an experiment, researchers blindfolded a group of people and told them that their right arms were being rubbed with a poison ivy plant. Their arms then reacted with itching, boils, and redness, classic symptoms of contact with poison ivy. Now this in itself isn't really a surprise, until you find out that the plant they used was a harmless shrub. The expectation of a reaction was enough for a rash to break out and to create itching and boils. They also showed the reverse effect, in which the group was exposed to the real poisonous ivy but were told that it was completely harmless. Despite the fact that they were all allergic to it, less than 1 in 6 of them showed a physical reaction to the poison. It's not just about reducing pain and other symptoms. The placebo effect can boost creativity as well as cognitive and physical performance too. For example, in terms of athletic abilities, lots of studies have shown placebo effects on speed, strength, and endurance. So it's nice to know that our brain can actually help us sometimes instead of hurting us. These next examples are linked and are the foundations for the misconceptions we hold about ourselves, others, and the world in general. The first is selective perception. It overlaps somewhat with the confirmation bias, and is the tendency to not notice and more quickly forget things that cause us emotional discomfort. We distort information so that we perceive only what we want to in any and all types of information presented to us. This is a real double-edged sword, because it's yet another example of our brain trying to do us a favor by allowing us to filter relevant information and avoid overload. Given the endlessly vast amount of information that we're able to perceive, this is more than useful, it's vital. But unfortunately, in many situations, this particular feature of the brain will once again also cause you to miss out on important information too. Besides the obvious aspects of your reality that this bias will affect, such as the media and the news you choose to engage with, your purchasing behavior or your political orientation, it goes deeper still. Think about your romantic relationships, past and present, or even just the friends you have chosen, and then think about this. You ignore very important information about these people you spend your time with, while overcompensating for the small things. Are they really who you think they are, or are they just who you wanted them to be in your head? We can go deeper still. It even occurs when you build the concept you have of yourself, because selective perception makes it very difficult to be objective, even about ourselves. So, how well do you truly know yourself? Selective perception is about allowing our expectations to drastically influence how we perceive the world. This can be pretty dangerous in conjunction with the process of stereotyping. If we're selectively perceiving things, we're certainly not looking for anything to contradict our views about others. This is why it's hard to change people's minds on important issues. We all know how problematic stereotyping can be. It's perhaps the biggest and most dangerous example of jumping to conclusions. Unfortunately, logic doesn't win out either. The emotional aspects of prejudice render sensible arguments against stereotypes useless. Unfortunately, there's no arguing with a stereotyped opinion. And the problem is, even though most people now know that conscious stereotyping is not acceptable, it carries on subconsciously and comes out in our behaviors, whether you're aware of it or not.
The human mind is incomprehensibly powerful. There is so much that we don't understand about it. Still, even the mind can be deceitful. You can hear Yanny where there's Laurel, see blue and black where there's gold and white, feel emotions that aren't real. The mind is also the place that creates our greatest limits. But what you must realize is that you are more than just your thoughts.
Who is your favorite superhero? There are so many to choose from that it can be tough to pick just one, but for millions of people, the answer is undoubtedly Black Panther. Portrayed on the big screen by the beloved Chadwick Boseman, Black Panther was an instant global phenomenon. Millions of moviegoers the world over flooded into theaters, some more than once, to escape into the colorful, Afrofuturist nation of Wakanda and watch the daring exploits of King T'Challa. It was, at the time, the most successful solo superhero movie to ever be released, beating out classics like Christopher Nolan's The Dark Knight. Today it remains one of the most celebrated cinematic achievements in the entire Marvel franchise. It's undeniable, we love the King of Wakanda. So much so that I'm sure many of us have found ourselves wishing that both he and the nation of Wakanda were real. How exciting would it be to live in a world where superheroes actually existed, where a rich and powerful African nation possessed technology light years ahead of anything currently available. Sorry to burst your bubble, but the reality would likely be much different than anything depicted in the MCU. We love T'Challa because we see his journey. We go with him from his lowest point when he loses his father, to him becoming king, tracking down a group of international arms dealers, and battling his long-lost cousin, Eric Killmonger, for the heart of his nation. But how would you feel if a foreign king you've never heard of suddenly revealed that he had superhuman abilities? And more than that his country controlled greater technology and more wealth than any other nation on the planet? Would you still love Black Panther then? The question is more complicated than a simple yes or no, especially given the complex issues of race, colonialism, and cultural identity surrounding Wakanda. Black Panther tackled these issues head-on, offering audiences a candid examination of some of history's greatest injustices. The central conflict of the narrative itself deals with the tensions created by the specters of racism and colonization. At the start of the film, the Wakandans are adamant about maintaining their isolationist politics, believing it to be the best way of protecting their nation from the chaos of the outside world. However, this view is challenged by the arrival of Killmonger, who seeks to upend the status quo. After defeating T'Challa in ritual combat and assuming control of the throne, Killmonger delivers a speech to the tribal council in which he recounts the struggles of Black Americans and asks, pointedly, where was Wakanda?
According to Marvel lore, while the rest of the African continent was swallowed whole by Europe during the Age of Imperialism, Wakanda stood idly by. It was watched as neighbor after neighbor fell to foreign invaders and did nothing as entire populations were enslaved and their land plundered for its resources. Wakanda continued to hide in the shadows as further injustices were committed against black communities in the form of policies like segregation and apartheid, and offered no assistance when it came to overthrowing these repressive systems. While it's likely that many black people around the world would welcome the sudden entrance of a hyper-advanced African nation onto the world stage, others might share in Killmonger's sentiments and harbor varying degrees of resentment. This can make for some awkward political situations, especially regionally. Wakanda's vast fortune and technological supremacy would immediately position itself as the head of the African Union, dramatically reorienting the continent's balance of power, to say nothing of the rest of the planet. African leaders might demand that Wakanda share its advanced technology, or even its wealth, to make up for historic failures. Those not of African descent would probably be suspicious and maybe even fearful of the sudden change to the existing geopolitical order. Even more so after learning that the country in question is led by a king with superhuman abilities, the nature of which would likely remain a highly guarded secret. A massive PR campaign would have to be launched to try and portray T'Challa as a magnanimous and peaceful ruler, but undoubtedly the idea of literal God King leading the world's most technologically sophisticated military would be too much for many people to accept. Critics would be quick to point out the lack of democratic representation in Wakanda, as well as the obvious problems of having a hereditary monarchy. Sure, T'Challa may be a benevolent leader, but what about the next guy? What would happen if, for example, a long-lost relative who didn't share in T'Challa's humanitarian worldview somehow took control of the country? It wouldn't be too hard to imagine a scenario where a conquest-driven warrior king sought to expand Wakanda's borders. T'Challa, and in fact the entire nation of Wakanda, would become a highly divisive topic both among world leaders and individual citizens in a similar way to nations like Saudi Arabia and Russia today. This could lead not to just anti-Wakandan protests, but possible assassination attempts as both disgruntled governments and fearful citizens aim to remove this new threat. This exact scenario serves as a premise for the Amazon series The Boys, a superhero parody in which a band of vigilantes attempts to take down an Avengers-style group called the Seven. The Seven are a tyrannical and corrupt team of superhumans who use their powers to serve their own selfish desires while enriching their corporate benefactor, Vought International. Their exploits consistently lead to the injury and death of innocent bystanders, but this collateral damage is covered up by Vought, which markets the group as saviors of humanity. The Seven's recklessness fuels public resentment, and a ragtag assembly of super powerless vigilantes known as the Boys form to try and assassinate them. The Boys is representative of a very real fear ordinary citizens have of the ultra-powerful. It's safe to assume that most people would be suspicious of an elite group of individuals with genuine superhuman abilities. It's important to remember that T'Challa isn't alone in the Marvel Universe. There's a whole ensemble of characters ranging from certified good guy Captain America to the genocidal Thanos. So if Black Panther exists, so should the others. With this comes a whole slew of new problems. By their very nature, superhumans create an imbalance in society. There's them, people capable of flying faster than fighter jets or chucking cars like they were wiffle balls, and then there's the rest of us, barely able to make it through our morning commute. This inequality of ability would lead to widespread feelings of fear and resentment. Chief among people's worries would be the belief that these individuals might use their powers to establish a new social and political order. To help prevent this, we'd likely see the formation of anti-superhuman organizations. These factions would push for legislation that might help level the playing field, or at least establish a legal framework to protect ordinary citizens. Marvel's 2016 film Captain America: Civil War uses this idea as the central conflict of its plot. Following the disastrous fallout from Avengers: The Age of Ultron, the United Nations attempts to rein in Captain America, Iron Man, and the rest of the crew in the form of the Sokovia Accords. This legislation places the Avengers family under the control of the UN and effectively ends any form of independent autonomy. This leads to a rift in the group, as half support the independent oversight while the rest believe it to be a potentially dangerous obstruction. The film concludes with the Sokovia Accords still in place and half the team being forced into hiding. Civil War explores the anxiety felt by many people regarding the recent rise of powerful, extra-governmental organizations. What do we do when entities like the Avengers impose their will on a country and its citizens? Who is responsible for the repercussions when the Hulk accidentally takes down an entire skyscraper? It's not a question with easy answers, but the Sokovia Accords are an example of how real-life governments might attempt to create safeguards against potential catastrophes caused by superhumans. It also clearly displays the impulse of international leaders to try and control this power as they would with biological weapons or nuclear technology, which, of course, would not stop merely at legislation. In a world with superheroes, militaries, governments, and even private entities would attempt to either recruit or manufacture armies of their own superpowered soldiers. Entire industries could develop in the rush to create the next Hulk or Captain America. Sadly, the sudden rush for superhuman superiority would trigger a new global arms race as geopolitical rivals seek to fill their ranks with the strongest, smartest, and deadliest individuals that science can create. It would be the Cold War all over again, but this time with superpowers instead of nuclear power. It's honestly a terrifying notion and one that we may soon be forced to contend with. Advances in gene therapy, robotics, and other cutting-edge fields have begun to open the door to a new world of human enhancement. In the next few decades, we may become capable of giving individuals abilities previously reserved for the realm of fiction. Superhero stories may one day be viewed not as far-out fantasies, but instead foretellings of our very own real future. The problem with these kinds of technologies is that they rewrite the rules of what is possible. Societies operate based on the assumption that human beings have certain limitations. If these limitations are surpassed, it'll force us to reevaluate how our civilization functions on a fundamental level. It might benefit us then to try and understand why exactly we're so obsessed with superheroes in the first place. While modern incarnations stem largely from the realm of 20th century science fiction, the idea of powerful champions battling monsters and saving innocents dates back to the very beginning of human history. The Epic of Gilgamesh is one of the oldest surviving pieces of recorded literature, and it's basically a superhero story. It tells of a legendary king with super strength, prophetic abilities, and unparalleled fighting skills who goes on a series of quests that culminate in the search for immortality. Over the course of his adventures, Gilgamesh slays demons, travels to the underworld, and undergoes a series of trials, but ultimately fails in his goal of learning the secrets of eternal life. Though initially despondent, his defeat leads him to accept his human limitations and instead learn what it means to live a good life. The story is a template for the epics that filled ancient literature. Gilgamesh's character provided direct inspiration for the demigod Hercules and heavily influenced the Greek poet Homer, whose work is filled with seemingly superhuman protagonists. These early heroes were created to serve as models of their society's virtues, instilling the values of bravery, fortitude, and honor into citizens. And just like the superheroes of today, these characters weren't perfect. Rather, each had tragic flaws that routinely led to disaster for themselves and those around them. Their strength wasn't in being able to perform astounding feats or slay countless enemies, but in their ability to face their flaws and learn from them. In fact, the archetypal plot structure of these stories, known as the hero's journey, provides a clear formula for personal growth. By leaving a place of comfort, encountering obstacles, and confronting our weaknesses, we're able to change for the better and hopefully return as a more complete version of ourselves. At the end of Black Panther, T'Challa is able to reconcile his political beliefs with that of his cousin. Although he rejects Killmonger's call to wage war against former colonial oppressors, he realizes that Wakanda's period of isolationism must come to an end. Heroes like Black Panther and Gilgamesh serve as role models we're meant to look to for inspiration. They represent the best in us and provide examples of how we might overcome difficulties in our own lives. We love superhero stories because they give us hope that we too are capable of great deeds, and because they serve as a reminder that every single one of us has the ability to change the world. So what if Black Panther was real? We may never know. But what I do know is that you don't need superpowers to be a superhero. Dozens of people throughout history have proven that time and time again. Wakanda forever. We all want better for ourselves, whether it's a bigger house, nicer car, higher salary, thriving business, or more recognition. We all want things we don't have, and most of us spend the majority of our lives chasing these things. Success looks different to different people, but there's no arguing that we all have some definition of it, and that we often feel far from that definition. Thankfully, we aren't limited by our current circumstances, and with the right tools, we can get to where we want to be. Here is everything you need to start doing today to get ahead. Start by sleeping on a regular schedule. Sleeping on a regular schedule is a game changer for improving cognitive function and mood. In fact, having a consistent sleep schedule is often more important than sleeping for a specific number of hours. If you wake up at 6 a.m. for work but like to sleep in until 10 a.m. on the weekends, you might want to rethink your sleeping patterns so you sleep and wake up at the same time every day. Doing this helps your body develop a consistent rhythm and will allow you to build a schedule that works for you and the specific activities that you engage in. When you wake up, the first thing you should do is make your bed. Making your bed right after you get up might seem insignificant, But the reality is that accomplishing this small task at the start of your day sets the tone for the rest of it. You'll get a feeling of accomplishment that gives you the dopamine boost you need to tackle the more complex tasks you take on as your day progresses. It also gives you a sense of calm. Even if you can't control every aspect of your life, you're in control of where you lay your head to rest. And sorting out your sleeping area also means you'll be less likely to jump back into bed, which, as I'm sure you all know, can quickly lead to a very unproductive morning and entire day. I said sorting your sleeping area because even if you don't sleep on a bed or are currently unhoused, you can still get the benefits of making your bed by simply arranging your sleeping area. Whether it's rolling up mats or folding sheets, putting these things away gives you the same advantage as making your bed. You want to read books, magazines, newspapers? Just read. Several studies show that regular reading increases the communication between parts of your brain that control language and processing. It can also help improve concentration and prevent cognitive decline in old age. But just like exercising, meditating, and eating healthy, these are all tips you have heard before. So let's get a little more specific. How do you get ahead at work? Well, first it's essential to identify your goals. If you approach every workday with a big question mark, you'll likely lose focus and sense of direction quickly. But once you identify a goal like a raise, a promotion, or a particular benchmark, you can start each day with ideas on how to get closer to your goal, even if it takes you a while to get there. That's why it's good to be specific. Think of yourself like a specialist rather than a generalist. With unlimited YouTube videos and college courses, many of us take advantage of dabbling in different skills and hobbies. The problem is that doing too many things can spread our attention so thin that it's difficult to hone in on that one skill that will move us forward. By becoming a specialist instead, especially in your work, you're more likely to build an impressive skill set that makes you stand out in the current difficult labor market. Of course, having hobbies and interests is essential for an excellent work-life balance, but in your career, just being okay at a lot of things doesn't get you nearly as far as being great at one or two things. Getting ahead is easier if you love what you do, or at least like it. Loving your work can sometimes be misunderstood as loving every aspect of your job, which is quite frankly impossible. Work is called work for a reason. It's not helpful to set the unrealistic expectation that you'll love every second of it. But suppose you are interested enough and perhaps even fulfilled at times by the work you do. In that case, you're more likely to push yourself further, enjoy building your skill sets, and face challenges with optimism rather than negativity. Once you get extremely proficient at your job, you'll soon discover that your skills can only get you so far. To get further ahead, you need to start promoting yourself. Now, self-promotion can sometimes get a bad rep, but if you've put in the time and effort to become a better employee, boss, or creative thinker, you deserve to brag about it. Also, making others aware of your accomplishments can do wonders to lift you off your plateau and keep moving forward. And when you do, having the right people around you is crucial. Stanford Graduate School of Business professor Bob Sutton says that your manager can have a more significant effect on your happiness and success than the company you work at. So whenever you have the opportunity, always choose to work with people who are quick to offer help when necessary. One thing to remember though is that if your managers or coworkers are there to help you, you have to be there to help them too. Being liked by people you work with and liking them back isn't so bad. You don't need the tough exterior that reigns superior in the workplace for so long. Putting up walls will cut you off from opportunities and, more importantly, relationships. Ask anyone anywhere in any field, and they'll all tell you that relationships are the key ingredient to a successful career. And how do you build relationships? Network. It's an annoying word, I know. Like me, you probably cringe at the idea of artificially making acquaintances for the sole purpose of advancing your career, but networking doesn't have to be like that. Think about all the people you've collaborated with. You might not have become friends with them, but you did get to know their innovative, motivated, and creative sides. If they needed a recommendation, wouldn't you happily give them one? Exactly. Networking in a meaningful way doesn't have to feel forced. It's building genuine connections with people who understand your work and are likely to help you in the future. As your network expands, you might start to compare yourself to others, but you shouldn't do that, because comparison is the thief of joy. Sometimes the best thing you can do to get ahead is to take what you want out of the equation. It may seem counterintuitive, but recognizing how your work contributes to other people's lives can make you more productive than just thinking about how it benefits you. Adam Grant is a renowned organizational psychologist who studies human behavior and helps people find motivation and meaning in their lives, especially in the workplace. In one of his earliest jobs selling ads for a travel guide series, He brought in a student who had been awarded a scholarship from his travel guide company to meet his colleagues, and after meeting the student, the entire company staff spent 142% more time on the phone and brought in 171% more revenue using the same sales scripts as before. Even though the content of their sales pitch didn't change, they were motivated, consciously and subconsciously, to do better by simply seeing someone who had been positively impacted by their work. So instead of worrying about what other people can do for you to help you get ahead, flip the switch and start thinking about what you can do for others. You'll be pleasantly surprised at how much more productive you are when you know your work is improving other people's lives. Now, the truth is, these things we've discussed aren't gas pedals you can step on to automatically speed you to the front of the rat race, because in reality, getting ahead is about more than a set of quick fixes. In fact, ahead isn't even a destination, it's a mindset. And it's essential to recognize that what might feel good in the short term might limit you in the long term. Eating an entire bowl of ice cream might seem like a fantastic idea today, and it might be, but keep doing that every day for the next few years and your health will suffer as a result. The same goes for how you can work to get ahead in life. Finding shortcuts or avoiding conflict can feel good, but when you decide to take the easy route, you're cheating yourself out of potential learning opportunities. Of course, it's equally important to be smart. Dragging things out just to feel like you're doing something can be a nasty trap. Mainly because maintaining your stamina is another critical component to getting ahead. It's easy to quit, most people do it. To become one of the people who don't, you'll need to push yourself, but not so hard that you burn out. You have to seek out challenges, nothing impossible, just practical ones that give you a healthy dose of dopamine once you accomplish them. You'll find small bits of motivation to hang on to when things get tough. You'll dig in and hang on even when things get rough. Failure is inevitable in all areas of life. No relationship is perfect, no job is perfect, no family is perfect. But instead of thinking of failure as a setback, think of it as an opportunity. It's information about your current mental and physical limitations and data about how you can improve. It's a reminder of how good it feels to try even when things don't work out. Failure teaches you that you aren't in this alone, and that asking for help isn't something to be ashamed of. Asking for help is actually one of life's remarkable skills, and so is saying, "I'm sorry." Accepting responsibility when you've done something wrong and not dishing out a meaningless apology allows others to see your humility. Once you accept that you make mistakes, sometimes even ones that hurt others, you're freed from the assumption that you always know what to do. Confusion is a part of life, and if you want to get ahead, you better learn how to navigate it. The only way to do that is by being able to adjust. We're all born into certain circumstances, hold particular beliefs, and expect different things out of life. But change is necessary even when it doesn't feel all that great. But here science has our back. You've probably heard the distinction between right and left-brained people. The theory is that if you're right-brain dominant, you're more intuitive, a creative thinker, qualitative about the way you perceive things, and you tend to look at the world with a big picture lens. On the other hand, if you're left-brain dominant, you're said to be more analytical, you pay attention to details, are ruled by logic, and you view the world more specifically and objectively. But a 2013 study by the University of Utah looked at the brains of over 1,000 young people between the ages of 7 and 29, and found no evidence of what we've been told about left and right-brained people. The study found that the activity in the left and right halves of a subject's brain was similar regardless of their personality. This is freeing because it means that there isn't some inherent brain chemistry that determines how you think and act. Depending on the situation, you can choose to be more analytical or more intuitive. You can adapt. So what is getting ahead? Is it earning more money, or is it about being able to look back and be proud of not just what you've done, but who you are? I'd argue for the latter, because just as much as you want to get ahead, it's easy to get ahead of yourself. To a place where you become so obsessed with your future, a place where your specific goals and feelings become so crucial to you that you lose sight of your journey. When people say it's lonely at the top, I often reply that they neglected everyone on their climb who loved them because they were so focused on the summit. Think about getting ahead more as a process rather than a race that you need to finish. Even as you're striving for excellence, always remember to stay in the present, looking around to take in the beauty of the experiences you're given on this journey of life. Getting ahead shouldn't have us running so fast that we pass on in an attempt to pass others. After all, life isn't a race to the finish, but an experience to be relished.
The human potential is incredible. Together we've gone to the moon, discovered the secrets that govern the universe, and learned to create life itself. Still, many of us are held back, chained by the stronghold of fear, both tangible and intangible. We fear our own end. We fear being cast out. We fear failure itself. When these thoughts come to you, you must remember that you are more than your limits.
Death can only be interpreted by people who are alive. Yet, since no one who is alive can simultaneously experience what it's like to be dead, who then does death actually concern? This logic is oddly reassuring. Even so, if my doctor were to call me up right now and tell me that I would die in 12 hours, I would still likely spend all that time in a state of debilitating fear and anxiety. Just thinking about this possibility makes me realize that whether I like it or not, death terrifies me right now, even as a person who is fortunate enough to be in good health. It seems irrational and perhaps illogical to fear something that I have so little knowledge about or control over. But no matter what I do, I just can't seem to shake this nagging fear of the unknown. And I'm not alone. According to the 2017 survey of American fears conducted by Chapman University, 20.3% of Americans are either afraid of or very afraid of dying. But why do we have such a strong fear of death? The fear of death largely comes from the uncertainty and lack of control of the situation. But perhaps there's a better way to think about our lives and our eventual passing that might end this fear, or at least chip away at its root cause. To start off, let's talk about the only other life event, aside from death, which has happened and will continue to happen to every single person who will ever exist on this planet. Birth. Try to imagine the moment you were born. Of course, you can't actually remember this, I know, but just try for a second to bring yourself back to that time. The moment when you were pulled out of the darkness by a mysterious set of hands, only to be flooded by fluorescent lights and the chaotic bustle of a delivery room. As your eyes adjusted to the light for the very first time, you also had to take in a room full of total strangers who were all likely staring at you. Some of whom you'd never see again, and others you could go on to spend the next 80 plus years with on this journey we call life. This journey that you, in that hospital room however many years ago, had absolutely no tangible knowledge about. We talk about how scary death is, but the truth is birth was probably equally as scary, if not more so. It's no wonder that we judge the health of the newborn by how hysterically they cry in the delivery room. My point in bringing all of this up is to say that death isn't the first life-changing existential experience you've gone through. Was birth scary? Most likely. But every single day since then you learned more and more about the experience that is being alive. To the point where you thought of going back to the state you were in before birth has now become the idea you fear. Mark Twain once wrote, "I do not fear death. I had been dead for billions and billions of years before I was born, and had not suffered the slightest inconvenience from it." This perfectly expresses another truth that most people fail to consider when it comes to death. We all know and seem to accept easily that there was an infinite amount of time before we were alive on Earth. So why is it so hard for some of us to grapple with the fact that there will also be an infinite amount of time that comes after our existence on Earth? When someone dies at an early age, we feel great sadness for all the earthly events they won't be able to be a part of. But when a baby is born, we don't mourn everything they missed out on before their delivery. We all seem to know how nonsensical it would be to feel sad about that. A baby's time of birth is what it is, a fixed situation which nobody has had really any control over. But when it comes to death, there seems to be so many what-ifs or if-onlys involved. Maybe it's because of the how and when of our passing seems to say something about the way that we live. Consider the death of Robert Atkins, the man who dedicated a large majority of his life to refining the Atkins diet and preaching it as the most health-conscious way to live, only to die by slipping on an icy sidewalk. People often reference this as a way to say that death is inevitable, no matter how healthily one chooses to live. A message which, ironically enough, is the exact opposite of the one Atkins spent his life trying to convey. Stories like Robert's are another major reason why some of us find death so frightening. The idea that the where, how, and when of our passing puts a climactic punctuation mark at the end of our existence and somehow adds to the definition of what our life meant. You either die a hero or live long enough to see yourself become the villain. We seem to accept and even participate in creating these punctuations or labels, even when it comes to external things and people that we have no interpersonal connections to. When a breaking news story emerges where an innocent person is murdered, The majority of us collectively labeled their life as beautiful and their death as tragic, and when that person's killer is found guilty and sentenced to death, we labeled their life as despicable and their death as deserved. Labeling others is a comforting habit that is strongly hardwired into our psychology. It's part of how we organize, simplify, and make sense of our world. Yet we all know that even the best one-word label couldn't possibly be used to sum up the entirety of who and what a person is, and what the life they lived was. So the idea that our death could assign us with one of these simplistic labels, which don't allow any room for the complexity of who we really were, is terrifying. If there's anything certain and non-debatable, it's that death is a termination of our physical bodies. Our hearts stop beating, our neurons cease firing, and we take one last breath. Our physical presence here on Earth is terminated at the time of our deaths. While this is undeniably true, it still leaves us with multiple unanswerable questions. A large one being, are we just a body, a spectacularly designed or random collection of cells, atoms, and molecules that is purely physical? Or is it possible that we're composed of a physical body, a physical mind, and something else? Something intangible and non-physical like, for the lack of a better term, a soul. This debate has been going on between philosophers for a millennium. Epicurus believed quite adamantly that we are merely physical beings whose deaths were a total annihilation of our existence, while some of Plato's most famous dialogues argue for the immortality of the soul. If you believe that there's nothing more to us than the atoms and DNA that compose our physical bodies and minds, then you might be what modern philosophers call a physicalist. If, on the other hand, your inclination is to believe that we are composed of a physical body, a physical mind, and something intangible that resembles the soul, then you might be what they call a dualist. There are other variations and subsects of these definitions, but for simplicity's sake, we'll leave it there. Thinking back now to the problem of death with all this in mind, we can clearly see that whether or not someone is a dualist or physicalist makes an enormous difference in the ways they would interpret their beliefs about death, and ultimately whether they would fear death or not. If death is a definitive end to the physical body, then, as far as physicalists are concerned, death is a pretty straightforward pill to swallow. Death is just the end. But for dualists, the possibilities are quite endless. For if we possess something like a soul, then the range of options of what could happen to that soul after our physical bodies die is wide open. While some people cling to religious texts and beliefs for some answers and comfort, non-religious people are left with a huge uncertainty over what life after death holds. And as humans, we have evolved to be naturally scared of the unknown. Maybe the best place to turn to for further investigation of death is to consider the stories of people who have died. The Near-Death Experience Research Foundation presents what many would consider to be the most compelling scientific evidence for life after death. Jeffrey Long, the foundation's creator, has studied and examined the accounts of thousands of people who have reportedly had near-death experiences. While no two people's near-death experiences are exactly the same, there are some characteristic features that have been commonly observed. Long has conducted and posted 5,100 interviews to date with people who have claimed to have had an NDE, and compiled the data he's gotten from them over the years. In this, he identified 12 essential elements that are consistently present in his subjects, some of which are an out-of-body experience, encountering deceased relatives, friends or mystical beings, and experiencing a sense of alteration in time or space. Technically speaking, having any kind of lucid experience while one is clinically dead, without a heartbeat, should be impossible. Still, 74% of the people interviewed reportedly felt conscious and alert during their time spent dead than they did in their waking lives. The remaining 20.4% reportedly felt the same amount of consciousness awareness in death as they do alive, while only 5.2% said they experienced less. Even though the belief that death is the end of our consciousness is relatively common, out of the thousands of people who participated in this survey, only 5% reported that to be true for their near-death experience. These statistics are startling for sure, and there are plenty more like this that are equally compelling. But I think that sometimes it can be too easy to tune out the significance of figures like these because, well, you can find statistical data to support just about any claim you're trying to make these days. Perhaps a more powerful and effective way to discuss NDEs is to delve into specific stories. Take this one, for example, reported by a woman who died by accidental electrocution at the age of 7. I was transported out of my body and surrounded by the brightest, warmest light ever. The only way to explain it is our true home. It felt very familiar. It felt like home. I had never felt at home here on Earth before or after this experience. I didn't feel or see my body. I believe I was more like a pure light source that flows just like a river of pure love and joy. I was just so happy to be home. Another person claimed that the Earth is like a film that hasn't been developed. Not until we reach the other side is the film developed. Everything will be seen in beautiful colors that don't exist here on Earth. And another said, in an instant, I knew that the life we live is an illusion. It's not real because it's a creation of our minds. We continually create thoughts and then project these thoughts outside of the mind, just as cinematic frames are projected onto a screen. Reports like these are incredibly interesting, but you might be wondering where the proof is. For all we know, these are just subjective accounts that people could be just making up. And you would be right. Sadly, as of right now, there is no definitive proof of the validity of NDEs. Like you, I also started off my research into this a little bit skeptical, but the more of these stories I heard and read over time, the harder it became for me to believe that there wasn't at least some validity to them. No matter what belief you choose to carry with you about what happens to us after we die, I think it's important to research the literature out there. Learn what the people who have first-hand knowledge have to say and use all the information to form a real, thought-out opinion for yourself. Because sadly, there is no way to tie a bow on this topic and wrap it up nicely. No matter what any of us say, death will always remain an existential mystery. But if you struggle with the fear of death, here is something that helped me tremendously, in hopes that it helps you too. The most comforting thing about death is that it will happen to us all. I made my first video on this channel in July 2017, after months of going back and forth on whether or not I actually wanted to create a YouTube channel. What would people think? What if people hate the videos and tell me that I don't know what I'm talking about? Who am I to talk about these topics? These were the thoughts that flooded my head. If you've ever been in a situation where you have to start something or give a presentation in front of a group of people, then I'm sure you've had a similar emotion. It's the fear of being judged, the fear that keeps us in chains and holds us bound from achieving our true potential. To understand why we care so much about what others think about us, we have to go back to the beginning of human history. Man, like many other animals, evolved to be social. Our survival was dependent on close-knit communities, tribes, and clans. We would hunt together, make shelter, and protect one another from predators should they dare strike. Being together made us thrive. So, at the time, being cast out of the clan almost always meant death. Without the technologies we have today, making shelter, hunting, and protecting yourself from wildlife was almost impossible for one person to do alone. Sadly, even now that our society has evolved to a point where we no longer have to worry about predators, and we have the tools and resources to provide food, clothing, and shelter for ourselves, the need to be part of a group still has been maladapted to our current reality. Then we were scared of being left out in the cold. Today we're scared of getting cancelled on Twitter because of something we said, or getting insulted for repeating clothes on Instagram, or getting hate comments on your YouTube video of people telling you your voice is becoming redundant and boring. You see, this feeling of being ostracized has worsened woefully because of social media. By creating likes and dislikes, we brought to light this need to feel validated and seen. In an instant, you can see just how many people support you, and that number can be addicting. It gets to the point to where we stop saying what we really want to say, and instead start saying the things we know will get us the most likes. Before you know it, you're posting certain thoughts, photos, and writing specific statements to get that attention and validation from others. How many times have you seen your favorite influencers and creators online suddenly sell out, where it feels like they're no longer authentic, only doing or saying the things they know will please the algorithm? I made a video about Unit 731 and the despicable things the Japanese government did in the Second World War. However, because it was not advertiser-friendly content, according to YouTube, the video didn't perform extremely well, and that's fine. This is the kind of ostracization and social conditioning that makes people fall in line and stop saying anything that might offend the people with money. It's like they tell you there's freedom of speech, but only when your microphone is turned off. Growing up, I always felt different. Of course, I had friends and wanted to be part of the social group. But I had questions about the universe that people just didn't like to discuss. Who wants to talk about death and the afterlife on the school playground, after all? Because of that, I felt different from everyone else, like a piece of a puzzle, but from another set. And so I grew up worried that everyone would look at me as weird and different. So I tried my best to hide my existential dread to fit in like everyone else. If you're watching this video right now, there's a high chance that you were also once a kid like me who was so worried about being disliked that you shield the real you just so you wouldn't be thought of as different. If you're still in that position, listen. Stop caring so much about what other people think and start living your life authentically. Yes, caring what others think is healthy. However, it becomes hurtful when we try to change ourselves just to be liked by others. You would enjoy your time on this floating rock far more if you choose to live your authentic self. And if someone rejects you because of it, you'll know that they were never meant for you in the first place. Now, if that sounds like a lofty dream and not really grounded in reality, I understand. Because the sad truth of this entire thing is that we do need to be judged fairly by others. At its core, that's what makes our society work. We agree that something is law, and whoever breaks it gets judged. We agree on certain moral principles, and whoever breaks them gets socially ostracized. We're judged at our places of work, in school, in our society as a whole. As sad as it sounds, gossip and ostracism help the greater good of the group. In 2014, Stanford professor Rob Willer led a study that explored the relation of gossip and ostracism to the harmony and functionality of experimental groups. In this study, Rob found out that groups that allowed their members to gossip and vote out underperforming members were able to sustain cooperation and prevent selfishness much better than groups that weren't allowed to do so. When we think of ostracism, we almost always see it in a bad light. However, this study proved that it does have a much more important role in preventing the weak and vulnerable from being bullied and ridden upon. Have you ever been in a group for a school project, only to quickly realize that there's one person who just wouldn't do anything because they know the group will pick up their slack? How's that make you feel? Now imagine you could remove these people from the group and then gossip to other groups about how bad of a team player they are. It might seem harsh at first, but because of our innate fear of being ostracized, more often than not, these people would see the reality of what they're doing and actually act better when reinvited into the group. It also prevents these selfish people from exploiting the more vulnerable people in the group and allows them to reach their full potential without fear of being taken advantage of. The researchers concluded that exclusion compelled participants to conform to the more cooperative behavior of the rest of the group. So yes, we need to be good team players for the proper functioning of society. However, being part of a group should never be at the expense of our own individuality. We should never get so scared of being ostracized that we do not say the things that matter to us for the fear of being judged. We need to realize that we will get to a point in our lives where we'll begin to assess everything that we've been taught as children. When you start to outgrow old beliefs and walk into new ones, do not be held back by the fear of what everyone who you grew up with would think. Caring about what other people think is necessary for the proper functioning of society. But when caring what other people think affects our abilities to make decisions for ourselves, that's when you need to pause and reconsider. You're a person with their own thoughts, ideas, dreams, and goals. Don't let the fear of being disliked hold you back from expressing that. You want to drop out of school to become a comedian? What would people think? You want to start a YouTube channel? What would people think? You want to be with someone from a different culture or religion? What would people think? This one question holds so many people back from doing what they love. It's like a chain that binds our neck and leaves us no room to breathe. We're like circus elephants, held back by a rope that might only exist in our imagination. Ultimate freedom is having the courage to be disliked. The boldness to stand firm in what you believe in, even when the crowd is saying something else. The courage to stand when everyone else is sitting, and run when everyone else is standing. The courage to be your authentic self, regardless of what everyone around you tells you to be instead. Developing the courage to be disliked is not easy. Remember that it's in our nature to care what other people think, so to stray from that even minutely would mean going against our very own biology, and that's never very easy. But the good news is that we can actually do it. The first and most important thing to realize is that everyone, just like you, is worried about their own insecurities. When we go out into the world, we're often so consumed with our own insecurities that we feel like everyone else is thinking about us and condemning us. But the reality is, more often than not, just like you, people are so worried about themselves that they aren't really thinking about anyone else. And when they do speak out against us, They're often projecting their insecurities on us, trying to bring us down to feel better about themselves. Don't let them do that. The difference between ostracization in early humans and what we have today is that with the early humans, it was only your closest relatives and members of your clan that could cast you out. However, today, because of social media, anyone and everyone can have an opinion about us. Share that opinion, and we're forced to take notice of it. The problem with this is that we're taking criticism from people we wouldn't take advice from. Think about it. If you wouldn't let this stranger into your house for fear of invading your privacy, why would you let them into your head, the most private place of all? Sometimes the people judging you and not letting you live your true potential aren't strangers. They're childhood friends and relatives. When that's the case, we need to remind ourselves that the consequences of living outside the group is not as sinister as it used to be. You have the tools and resources to thrive away from your primary group. And in fact, you can find another group to join, one that would accept you for who you are, and not try to force you into being something you're not. I know I've said some negative things about social media in this video and many others, but there are some positives as well. In this scenario where you no longer feel part of the group you were born into or grew up in, the internet offers you a community of people who are willing to accept you from all over the world. You just have to take the time to find them. Lao Tzu wrote in Tao Te Ching, "Care about people's approval, and you will be their prisoner." The courage to be disliked is the key that opens the prison doors and sets you free to be the person you've always wanted to be.
There's a darker thought that creeps in sometimes. The desire to disappear, to not be here at all, to stop existence itself. But somewhere deep in that feeling is a kind of clarity, a strange peace in realizing that maybe, just maybe, none of this matters. That the only point to existence is to, well, exist. It's at this moment that you wake up to the realization that you are more than your failures and fears.
Sleep is good, death is better, yet surely never to have been born is best. These lines close a 17th century poem by German writer Heinrich Heine. The piece is titled Death and His Brother Sleep, compares these two states, suggesting that we experience a bit of death each time we fall asleep. While sleeping, we glimpse the void and briefly know what it would feel like to no longer exist. Some might find it unsettling to conceive of sleep as a practice for death, but when your head hits the pillow every night, where do you go? Exactly. This proximity to our final resting state might be alarming for some, while others might find solace in this brief escape. Think of a time when you've been horrendously embarrassed or undergone immense stress or grief. When your head hits the pillow, you are free from whatever's bothering you, even if just for a few hours. You get that sense that when you close your eyes, you collapse inward, shrinking so far into yourself that you vanish entirely. Death, of course, is final, and so it's impossible to know what it would feel like. Yet, you can be sure that your problems and your worries won't follow you into the afterlife, if there is any. Under the sweet release of death, you would be free. The thing with death, though, is that a footprint of your life would still be left behind. Loved ones would mourn your loss, embarrassing moments that people would still remember, but there's a third option that's not temporal like sleep, and doesn't leave hurt behind like death. If you're watching the video right now, chances are you've flirted with this third option. You've had the desire to not exist. What exactly is this feeling? How does it differ from death, and what can it teach us about life? The desire to not exist is stronger than death. To not exist is to have every trace of yourself and every mark you've left on the world erased. No one would have ever known you. All your achievements and accomplishments vanish along with your failures. To die would be to still leave behind some memory of who you were. To not exist wipes away everything you are and ever were. While the implication is intense, the desire is often fleeting, sometimes knee-jerk. It overcomes you in an instant, maybe at a time when life isn't going your way. Perhaps you're going through a breakup where you lost a loved one, or it could be that you've just had one of those days where life piles everything on top of you and you feel like you're being crushed. You see a list of problems before you, and the fantasy of slowly drifting away is more appealing than facing your issues head-on. Though it's not often discussed, I would bet that most people have wished to not exist at some point. Could this desire serve a purpose in our lives, and why, at times, can it feel so overwhelming? The word desire itself describes an intense wish for something one doesn't have. It transcends a mere want and is affiliated with something usually unobtainable. Think about the desire for fame or fortune, to be well-liked or beautiful. Desires often surpass our daily wants and needs like food or water. To desire something is, in some ways, to be seduced by it. You see it right before you, yet it's just out of your grasp. The desire to not exist is frustrating because, unlike fame or fortune that still exists within some realm of possibility, it's impossible to have never lived. The person watching this video exists, you have existed, nothing, not even death, can change that. So the desire to not exist can never be fulfilled. It doesn't spring from any coherent, logical belief. This desire is often not discussed because of its proximity to suicide and suicidal ideation. But it's very different. It lacks the concrete outcomes and implications of suicidal ideation. The desire to not exist can never come true, while death by suicide is unfortunately obtainable. Although it can never happen, this feeling can still be overwhelming. If you think about it too deeply and too often, it can quickly lead to a terrible mental health state. If you experience this desire in a way that's becoming overwhelming, you should seek professional help. For most people, though, this feeling of never having been offers a way to cope with the heavy burden of life. It provides temporary relief from whatever you're going through and helps to decenter you from your experience. By imagining a world without you, you understand how insignificant many of life's problems are. If the odds shifted by even a minute fraction, you wouldn't be here today and none of this would matter. So why should it bother you so much? If you find comfort when you imagine your non-existence, I would encourage you to look further into nihilism. A nihilistic worldview detaches meaning from all realms of reality. It's the philosophy of meaninglessness, after all. When you turn that inward and apply it to selfhood, technically from a nihilist point of view, you already don't exist. Throughout your time here on Earth, there is no such thing as the coherent self. Nihilism might sound scary initially, but it doesn't have to be. We made a video about optimistic nihilism that I think would be really good to explore. On the other end of the spectrum, though, there's a different philosophical school of thought that centers very heavily on the existence of the self. René Descartes and other philosophers center their thinking around the existence of the self. Because you know you're thinking, you can perceive that you're conscious of your mind, proving its existence. All other aspects of reality can be thrown into doubt. How can you know that an apple is really red, or that the people in front of you are really here? Couldn't a malicious force be deceiving your every perception? Your existence seems to be the only thing you can be sure of, and while most people don't live in as much constant doubt as Descartes' philosophy suggests, most of us do experience the self as tangible and coherent. I think, therefore I am seems ingrained in our daily lives, and most of us, except for the hardcore nihilists out there, go about our days with the knowledge that we are. But it can be pretty difficult to experience your existence in every waking moment of every day, with no break. To make matters worse, sleep can sometimes be elusive, especially when you have that much on your mind. If you manage to sleep, sometimes you have nightmares that force you to continue to exist, even in what should be moments of rest. Living can feel so intense because there is no escape. Being alive can sometimes feel exhausting even when you aren't busy or overwhelmed. But especially when you're overstimulated, the desire to not exist can creep in. Think about being at a party or a family reunion where you make many vague social connections with people you barely know. You must constantly be on, performing your existence to those nearby. Especially for an introvert, socializing like this can be draining, and it can make you want to fade into the background or oblivion. Social media intensifies the need for you to be perceived constantly. Online, you always exist, even when you log off. Your social media profiles are available to anyone who wishes to find them, meaning you are perceived without your awareness. And what you post affects these perceptions, meaning you must always be your best self online. Even when showing a more vulnerable side, it's still a part of yourself you choose to share. Not only do you have the burden of existence online, but it has to be your best existence, and you must maintain it over time. What I've described so far is a baseline existence. It's what's required of you daily as you interact with people in your family, at school, and at work. It's also the existence that you inhabit between you and yourself. The perception of yourself that Descartes talks about, or your inner monologue. And at times, it's not other people we're sick of. You can also want to escape yourself. The want to leave yourself is inherent in the desire to not exist. The mind sometimes feels like a prison of your own making, which makes it even more unbearable. You can sometimes get that itchy feeling, like you want to jump out of your skin. The thoughts in your head can make you feel annoyed or angry with yourself. Unfortunately, while we can find respite from other people, we cannot escape our minds. The desire to no longer exist can be pointed inward, something we fantasize about when we no longer want to be ourselves. All these aspects are compounded when life gets busy or unpleasant. Dealing with grief, a breakup, or losing your job alongside the stress of familial obligations and basic self-maintenance might make you want to wither away. This is why this desire is more common than we realize or discuss. We must remove the shame associated with admitting that sometimes existing can be tiring. We need to create safe spaces for people to share that feeling without labeling it as suicidal ideation when it's not. It's not that you don't want to be here anymore, you wish you never were. It's a desire for stillness, privacy, and quietness, even from our own thoughts. While this desire can't ever fully be fulfilled, the feelings associated with it can be recreated, albeit temporarily. By purposefully embracing boredom and engaging in mindfulness practices, we can quiet the mind and get that stillness we desperately crave. Close your eyes and imagine yourself drifting out of your body and away from yourself. Imagine you are actively detaching your body and then your mind. You're essentially practicing what it feels like to not exist. Many people use and abuse substances as a shortcut to achieve the feeling of non-existence, the temporary escape from the self. This method is unsustainable and will probably make you feel worse about yourself in the long run. We underestimate how caught up we are in ourselves and how much our existence weighs heavy on our minds. It can feel excruciating to be alone with yourself when all you want to do is escape yourself. But trying to do the opposite of existence in a healthy, sober way might satisfy your want to disappear, and when you do return to yourself, instead of feeling the crash after a dopamine hit, you'll feel calmer, ready to face all that comes with existence. Watch this video next to understand the power of meditation and how you can use it to temporarily fulfill the desire to not exist. Life is but a walking shadow, a poor player that struts and frets his hour upon the stage, and then is heard no more. It's a tale told by an idiot, full of sound and fury, signifying nothing. Have you ever met someone who calls himself a nihilist? Maybe you have a friend from college or a family member who says they're a disciple of Nietzsche. At every opportunity, they love to wax poetic about the meaninglessness of life. Briefly indulging them in their philosophical ideas can expand your mind and help you to see things you never would have, but the truth is, outside of philosophical discussion, leading a nihilistic life is bleak. Think about it, if nothing matters and we're all just specks of dust floating through space and time, what's the point in trying at all? Building healthy relationships with friends and family doesn't seem worth it because in the end, everyone you know will die anyway. All attempts at self-improvement are futile because in the universe's grand plan, none of it matters. Even if you're not all doom and gloom, there will be days when getting out of bed will seem pointless, where life itself will seem kinda pointless, and the current state of the world, with issues like the climate crisis, the rise in extreme politics, and economic instability, doesn't help with our psychological state. This glimpse into the void might dissuade you from wanting to do anything with your life. You're staring down nihilism, the belief in nothing. And framed like this, it makes life sound pretty awful. But there's another way to look at nihilism, one that teaches you not to see the glass as half full or half empty, but instead to throw the glass away and drink straight from the faucet until you're satisfied. This is optimistic nihilism, the realization that the universe's meaninglessness is the most liberating thing in the world. It's the type of nihilism you get when standing on the precipice of a huge mountain or watching a mother bird feed her young. It's the profound smack of insignificance you feel when faced with the miracle of your existence. The amount of luck and chance that it took for you to get here in the first place. According to the nihilist, you and I don't matter. Nothing does. Religious morality or societal norms don't restrict your existence. You are entirely free and in control of making your life mean something. Once you accept the meaninglessness of your life as a gift rather than a burden, you find peace with the life you have. Because life is brief and fleeting, it's precious. Writing in the late 19th century, German philosopher Friedrich Nietzsche was worried about modernity. He was very critical of the traditional European morality and the religion of his time, which placed Christian beliefs at the center of social and political life. In his 1882 book, The Gay Science, he proclaimed the infamous line, "God is dead, God remains dead, and we have killed him." Here Nietzsche didn't make an argument for atheism. Instead, he observed that believing in one true Christian God was no longer central to European society. People's lives no longer revolved around the church's calendar or teachings. Industrial means production gripped Europe, flooding the pockets of factory owners and enforcing a standardized workday on everyone else. With that, personal freedom and agency became core values in society. People no longer yearned for a higher power to guide them through life, explain what comes after death, or show them right from wrong. Increasingly, people took these matters into their own hands. While Nietzsche was critical of religion, he was equally skeptical of what society could become without it. He understood that without Christianity as a guiding principle, people might move through life confused and disorientated. A world without God creates a void of understanding in our lives, and humans aren't psychologically capable of a pure belief in nothing. We're always searching for purpose in anything, even when we're not aware of it. Think about how you start your day. Imagine you wake up and look out your window to see a beautiful owl perched on your balcony railing. You might associate that with having a good or bad day depending on the culture you were raised in. We're constantly making connections and associations like this in our lives down to the most mundane things. People aren't built to remain in a constant nihilistic state. It's only a phase that allows us to gain perspective on the structures that govern our everyday life. According to Nietzsche, we fill the void where God once was with ourselves. We become our own tiny gods, so to speak. We give ourselves the authority to distinguish right from wrong and determine our individual meanings in life. If nihilism from a Nietzschean point of view interests you, we made an entire video on nihilism, so you can check that out by clicking on the link in the description. The existentialists who came after Nietzsche, like French philosopher Jean-Paul Sartre, expanded on this idea. To Sartre, we have complete freedom over our lives in a world without God or objective meaning, but with great power comes great responsibility. You have the power to shape the life you want to live. Let that sink in for a moment. Yes, you can make good choices for yourself, but how are you supposed to know which choices are good, and how often do you do things that are against your own self-interest? In good moments when things are going well for you, you might feel empowered and in control. You may get the promotion you deserve or marry the person you love. You might move to a new city and establish a community of friends that you couldn't imagine life without. You've invested time, energy, and love into making a meaningful life for yourself without following arbitrary rules or some intangible plan ordained from above. All the good things in your life have come from you. Yet, in the trenches of the everyday, life can seem overwhelming, especially when you're in charge of making sure you have a good one. To give our lives meaning, we create internal narratives about ourselves, and this is where we start to run into issues. We tell ourselves we're hard workers, and consequently the importance of our jobs and the identity they provide us with start to weigh us down. It's the same at school. Students get sick with anxiety about test scores and grades as if getting into the perfect college will finally confirm their life's worth. Similarly, you inject meaning into your love and family life. You strive to be the perfect parent, child, or partner because of your belief that these relationships will make your life meaningful. This is what keeps people in unhealthy or toxic relationships. They've attached this idea of meaning or worth to something that's ultimately meaningless. Having to constantly reaffirm who you are because there's no higher power to do that work for you can be exhausting. While we have the freedom of total control, it also bogs us down. What happens when you're busy shaping the life you think you want, yet you're still unhappy? All this meaning-making, trying to make sense of your life, contributes to a plague of depression and anxiety, especially among millennials and Gen Z. People are burned out, stressed out, and exhausted. So why do we chase meaning? Even with this feeling in the back of our minds that none of it matters, there's a contradiction between our pursuit of meaning and the reality of a meaningless universe. It's devastating to confront the idea that all the hard work we put into making our lives mean something is for nothing. Optimistic nihilism is the solution to this anxiety that we inherit when we're forced into the position of making meaning out of our lives. Yes, nothing matters, but isn't that a relief? You can find yourself responding to the seemingly urgent work emails at 3 a.m. or over-obsessing over your Instagram caption, but in the moment, it feels like the weight of the world rests on these things. You spend late nights tossing and turning, all of your mistakes and wrongdoing spinning, until you've convinced yourself that you're the worst person on the planet. But embracing that none of these things ultimately matter is freeing. Forgive yourself for your past mistakes and look forward, excited to experience the future. When we're the center of our own structures of meaning, every choice we make, good or bad, becomes weighted with significance. When you find yourself in one of these mindsets where your life feels too big to handle, remind yourself that you're small and insignificant. The universe is indifferent to your worries, struggles, and mistakes, and in the end, none of it matters. You'll die one day, and in the future, no one will remember your brief flight on this planet. There's no use fretting about trying to create the perfect life, because the energy spent making your life mean something is worthless. When it's all said and done, you're dust. It's completely normal to allow the squirming sensation of your insignificance to wash over you for a moment, but staring nihilism in the face is only uncomfortable if you let it be. If you call yourself an optimistic nihilist, it's probably good practice to confront all the different emotions your meaninglessness makes you feel. Otherwise, you won't reap the actual benefits of optimistic nihilism. Instead, it'll be a bandage to your problems, something you just tell yourself to believe in order to get through the day instead of a true guiding principle. You need to sit with your nothingness and accept it for what it is. Then use the objective meaninglessness of life to relieve yourself from the pressure that meaning-making entails. Take a look at your life and all it means to you, your relationships, the values you hold close, the things that get you out of bed in the morning. You have to be willing to part with all of them and embrace the void that they leave behind. Suddenly, the choices you make are the problems you face every day. Things that take up so much of your mental capacity don't seem so overbearing. Optimistic nihilism frees you from the crushing burden of meaning-making. Of course, it doesn't absolve you of wrongdoing. Your actions still have consequences, and you shouldn't give in to all your impulses for the sake of it. Continue creating a life that you love, one that you're excited to live, whatever that means. But just know that in the end, everything you've made will dissolve into the ether and you'll leave nothing behind. In the face of this reality, take advantage of all the sweetness life offers. The good things in your life are made all the more beautiful because of their fleeting insignificance. Sharing a meal with those you love, the smell of blooming lilacs in spring, and even petting your cat. It's such a miracle that you're here, able to experience anything. So shouldn't you spend your life enjoying yourself instead of worrying so much about making your life mean something? Life is precious, beautiful, and awe-inspiring, despite its chaos and disorder. It's a wonder that you can find goodness amid a void of meaning. You need to end the hopeless search of meaning-making and dive headfirst into the void. And when you emerge on the other side, you'll find nothing. But that nothing will be clear and bright, a guiding light into a better, yet fleeting life.
You are not just your body, not just your mind, not your fears, your failures, or even your existence. You are something much stranger, much bigger. You are a universe experiencing itself from the inside.
Consciousness. It's our awareness, our understanding, our ignorance. Our daily consciousness leaves out more than it takes in. And due to this, it leaves out important things. Things that would help relieve us if we knew them. If we had a higher awareness, a better consciousness, we would feel better. We would be more at peace with things. The deep down truth of things is screened by our consciousness. Our sensory organs will pick things out. Our eyes can only see certain things, our ears can only hear certain things. We have to create instruments and other tools to see things we as humans cannot, to expand our understanding and thus our ego, or consciousness. Humans evolved and became the dominant species on Earth by a long shot. It's due to our innate ability to network with each other. If humanity was wiped out and restarted, like loading an old save file, communities would still form. Structures within society are inevitable due to the variety of brains. Some are good at critical thinking, others are more artistic. However, we are all wired with some innate features. Just as humans form societies that evolve, other creatures do as well. But we're different. We are customizable characters, basically. We can kind of mold ourselves into whatever kind of person we want to be. We can't know for certain that animals or any other life on Earth is conscious or can even function in the same way that we do. Let's put it this way. I know that I have my own thoughts and feelings and emotions, but how can I know for certain that you, or anyone else, does? There's no way I can go to your head and see things 100% from your perspective. I can't know what you're thinking, or if you can even think in the first place. To truly understand the universe, to understand and actually experience life, you have to give yourself up. There's no point in sustaining bliss, and being permanently at an all-time high. The life you're living is what you have put yourself into, what ego you've formed, only you don't want to admit it. You want to believe it happened to you. Day to day, you play non-bliss in order to be able to experience bliss. You put yourself into bad situations. You let in the negative experiences in life just to feel some kind of satisfaction when it goes the other way. Self implies other. White implies black. Death implies life. You can feel your existence as fundamental, not as an accident. At the basic level, at the lowest level imaginable, you are the fundamentals of existence. The same thing that makes you is the same thing that makes up everything else. If you can step back from what you believe, if you can step back from what your sensory organs have turned you into, you start to see things for what they actually are. Do you define yourself as a victim of the world, or as the world? Love is only possible due to the lack of self. You give up all your secrets, the walls you've built to keep people at an arm's distance slowly lower, one by one, until you're a completely open book, until all your pages have been read, and the rest of the pages are blank, waiting to be filled with this newfound love. In basketball, or soccer, or football, you're constantly giving the ball to someone else. The point of the game is to have the ball in your hand for the least amount of time, to constantly be passing it to someone else, to shoot it, to get it out of your hands. It keeps the game going, and life is the same way. If you define yourself, you, as only being what your ego is, as the things you do voluntarily, then you're the victim. It's because of some higher power that you were put here when you didn't ask for it. But what about the things you do involuntarily? Do you beat your heart, or does it just happen to you? You do those things, even though you don't know how. Words don't work here. As Alan Watts said, everyone is fundamentally the alternate reality. Not God in a traditional sense, but God in the sense of being the self, the deep down basic whatever there is. And you're all that. Only you're pretending you're not. A mind that can ask, who am I? Why am I here? What is the purpose of all of this? Tends to forget. As I said, your consciousness tends to leave out critical information at times. A consciousness that can view the world and take in sensory information tends to forget what's behind those eyes. A mind that hasn't gone deep enough to find where those questions come from. Because the same place those questions come from is the same place those answers lie. The brain controls everything. In order to go to the extremes of the universe, to places we can only dream of going, we must first dive deep into something that is all inside of us. Take the Big Bang, for example. Now there's hundreds, thousands of theories as to how we came into existence, but let's go with this one. You believe that you are strictly you. Your human body is all that you are and all that you have ever been. You're simply a small speck of dust in a vast sea of galaxies, stars, planets. You're irrelevant. But rolling back the clock, things get smaller. The universe was more compact. The atoms that make you up are building blocks of the universe, of the hot gas clouds that form stars, that allowed solar systems to form, that allowed planets like Earth to form. If you keep rolling back this clock, you were around at the very instant everything came into existence. That is you too. When everything was infinitesimally small, you were there. But we define ourselves as being only us, mere humans walking on a planet that we didn't ask to get put on. But frankly, every one of us somehow made this happen. We just go on and pretend we didn't. It's because of how we define ourselves. Are you the victim, or are you the world? As cringy as it may sound, everyone you meet is just a small packet of the universe. A present, whether they're a pleasant one or not, that was packaged together from billions of years of engineering and architecture on a universal scale. But instead, we define ourselves as something completely separate from it, something not connected whatsoever, which is a foolish view. We tend to search for how the universe came into being, but we're just the universe trying to understand itself. In order to get to that conclusion, we have to reframe our mindset. We're not as different as we all think. Your name is given to you at birth. Your ideas and personality are collected from the world. Scraps, bits and pieces here and there cling to you like a magnet. So what part of you is you? We are all different manifestations of consciousness, but we are all fundamentally the same thing. We all may have different egos, different personalities, but when you step back, drop the ego, we are all connected. View the universe as a forest. Every one of us is a twig, a leaf, a branch. But together, we form life. Our origin, our roots, are connected together. Just as the roots of trees form a vast network which brings these massive forests to life, humanity's roots all come from the same place. Energy cannot be created or destroyed. It can only be transferred from one form of energy to another. But many of us have this fear that it's all going to come to an end. And while yes, your life will end, your energy will not. It will continue onward, forever. But our consciousness has convinced us otherwise. We form this thought process, almost like we've been hypnotized, to think that we are all there is and all there ever will be, and that it's all going to come to an end. This leaves us unsatisfied and unhappy. But the universe is continuous, and you are technically the universe, so you will continue on as well. Your death is not the end of you, it's the death of your ego. Many people experience the same exact thing while living: ego death. It tends to be induced through psychedelic drugs, LSD, shrooms, the list goes on. While working on this video, I actually experienced it myself, and although not intentional, it provided clarity in a way I've never before experienced. It's not the ego in the vernacular sense, as describing a person's self-worth. It's the philosophical ego. It's the complete loss of subjective self-identity. Everything that you believe you are will disappear. You're void of emotion, of connection to anything around you, of connection to what makes you, you. The idea of being a person doesn't make any sense. The words I, me, and myself have zero meaning whatsoever. The world can normally be put into two categories, myself and not myself. While experiencing ego death, this line is blurred. I am completely gone. There's only the awareness of existence. The lifetime accumulation of your thoughts and emotions are put on pause. It's as if you're on a cliff approaching an infinite void beneath you. Your life is continuous and exists all the way up the mountain until you reach the edge. Beneath you, though, is the unknown. Ego death is jumping into that void, leaving behind everything you've ever known. It's as if you've stepped out of your body into a separate entity. You start to see things for what they actually are, but things don't actually exist. Things is just a noun, it's a fragment of speech. And speech is just another instrument we've created to try and understand the world around us. Our senses allow us to go about our daily lives and traverse the world, but they don't really offer any explanations, so we have to make them up ourselves. While experiencing ego death, you disconnect from all of that. You have a heightened awareness. It's truly as if you're experiencing a higher level of consciousness that no person can understand. You reach this level that words can't explain. The instruments we made to try and understand our place in the universe shatter completely. Explaining it in terms of I saw or I felt don't seem reasonable. Our languages are instruments created to explain things that someone experiences. But while undergoing ego death, there is no someone. There is no me. So how do you describe it? It's as if your slate was wiped clean, your character's save file was corrupted, but you're still in the game. Because of this, ego death can be scary. But it can also be a very enlightening experience. It's both constricting and freeing. It's white and black. It's like you're defining what life is like through experiencing death. We cannot be more sensitive and welcoming to pleasure without being more sensitive and accepting to pain. You're flying and sinking at the same time, being pulled from below, and above, in every direction, at once. While going through it, I ended up reaching a moment of acceptance. Ego death, while often extremely anxiety-inducing, offers a glimpse into a reality free of that. A life free of your personal flaws, your daily thoughts, your responsibilities. It personally feels as if time is frozen, and wherever your mind wanders is free to judge things as they truly are. You are the observer and the observable. Surprisingly, the conclusion I came to is the same conclusion I came to while making a previous video of mine, and it's that nothing in life really matters. Fear in general tends to come from us not being able to make peace with the chaos that is the universe, not being able to cope with the idea of entropy, that everything is tending towards disorder. Forming an ego is disorderly in the same way. You go further and further down your own tunnel and stray further from everyone else. Experiencing ego death is breaking out of that tunnel, pulling back, and understanding that the network of these tunnels that encompass every human on Earth all eventually return back to the same place. When I die, when my ego is completely gone forever, when my physical body breaks down and no longer resembles the form it's in today, I'll still somehow be here. Right now, I'm an hourglass. The sand is slowly leaking its way to the bottom, and eventually it'll all be there. It's the end of the line for me. But when that day comes, the universe will stop by, take the hourglass, flip it over, and whatever made me will then become something entirely different. We're all just a temporary collection of atoms, and whatever you and I subjectively believe we are won't last forever. But objectively, we will. For now, just enjoy the ride.
Powers of 10 are pretty cool. They're actually pretty powerful if you know what I'm saying. But what is a power of 10? In math, a power of 10 is any integer power of the number 10. Basically, 10 multiplied by itself a certain number of times. Any number of times. For example, 10 to the power of 1 is just 10. 10 squared is 100. 10 cubed is 1000. You get the idea. The powers of 10 help us compare the relative size of things. Here, n represents any number you want. It's called the order of magnitude. A positive order of magnitude will make x bigger, while a negative number will make x smaller. The effect of adding one extra zero to the beginning or end of any number may seem irrelevant. But what happens if we take these numbers to the extremes? What might these numbers represent? Believe it or not, the powers of 10 actually put our universe into perspective quite nicely. Let's start with the really small powers of 10. At 10 to the negative 35 meters, we come to what is known as the Planck length. Planck length is the smallest measurable distance in the entire universe. Much like at the center of a black hole, at a scale this tiny, the laws of physics break down and cease to be valid. The amount of time it takes a photon of light to travel one Planck length is known as the Planck time, and is equal to 10 to the negative 43 seconds. Meaning that this is the shortest measurable time possible. Any time shorter than this physically has no meaning at all. This is why, at the moment, scientists can only say that the universe came into being after it was already 10 to the negative 43 seconds old. Getting larger at 10 to the negative 18 meters, we reach quarks. These are the subatomic particles that compose protons and neutrons. 10 to the negative 7 meters, we reach the smallest forms of life, single-celled organisms. At 1/10 of a meter, you'll find things that you can see, like eggs, birds, and toilet paper. At 1 meter, we have everyday life, humans, dogs. Blue whales come in at a solid 30 meters. Next, we come across the meaning of life, or 42, whatever you decide it is. At 270 meters, we reach the length of the Titanic. Triple that, and we get the population of Vatican City, the smallest country in the world. It's kind of funny because Central Park in New York City is actually 4 kilometers long, and is 8 times larger than Vatican City, which is an entire country. Clocking in at 11,000 meters is Phobos, Mars' largest moon. Fun fact, one day it's going to crash into Mars, so if we're going to colonize it, we should probably find a way to deal with it. With an order of magnitude of 5, we have Hydra, one of Pluto's moons. Even though it's a moon, it's only 100 kilometers across. The state of West Virginia in the United States is actually 4 times as large. There's also about 10 to the 5 hairs on the average human head. At 2,300 kilometers in diameter, we have everyone's favorite planet, Pluto. Oh, wait. Anyway, moving on, with an order of magnitude of 7, we have Earth. At 12,700 kilometers, at a diameter of 200,000 kilometers, we have Proxima Centauri, the closest star to our Sun. It's also home to Proxima b, an exoplanet with features much like Earth. If there were to be a manned mission to any other star system's planets, Proxima b would probably be the first choice. With an order of magnitude of 9, the Sun clocks in at about 1.4 million kilometers wide. It accounts for more than 99.8% of the mass in our solar system. At 10 powers of 10, we come across the orbits of Mercury, Venus, and Earth, ranging from 36 billion kilometers from the Sun all the way to 93 million kilometers. Although these orbits seem pretty big, they're dwarfed by one of the most luminous stars in the sky, the Pistol Star. At 470 million kilometers wide, it radiates as much energy in 20 seconds as our Sun does in one whole year. But the Pistol Star is nothing when compared to the largest star ever discovered, UY Scuti. It is over 2 billion kilometers wide, and if it were to replace our Sun, it would completely swallow the planets of Mercury, Venus, Earth, Mars, Jupiter, and Saturn. At 26 billion kilometers, we reach what is known as a light day. It is exactly how far light travels in 24 hours. This distance is currently farther than any human or space probe has ever traveled. At 10 to the 14 meters away from Earth, our solar system appears only as a small point of light in the sky, just like every other star that we see in the night sky. 10 to the 15 meters, we have the Cat's Eye Nebula, one of the most complex nebulae ever discovered. The entire nebula is nearly half a light year in diameter. At 2 light years away from Earth, we reach the Oort cloud, a region of space filled with water and methane ice. At this far distance, the sun's gravity no longer has an effect on objects past this point. Other stars are stronger. At 10 to the 17 meters, we have a familiar sight, the Pillars of Creation. Each pillar is over 5 light years long, that's about 48 trillion kilometers each. Everyone has seen these before. However, they won't last forever. They're actually already gone. The Pillars of Creation are located at about 7,000 light years from Earth, but about 6,000 years ago, they were destroyed by a nearby supernova, meaning that in 1,000 years, they'll fade away from our view and disappear into the darkness of space. Skipping forward to 10 to the 21 meters away from Earth, we can finally see the Milky Way galaxy in its entirety. Every star in the night sky that you can see lies within our galaxy. However, at 10 to the 22 meters, we reach the distance to our nearest neighboring galaxy, Andromeda. You can actually see Andromeda in the night sky with a simple pair of binoculars or normal telescope. 10 to the 23 meters, we reach what is known as the Local Group. Its name pretty much tells you what it is. It's the local group of galaxies that are near the Milky Way. We're actually the second largest just behind Andromeda. The Local Group is a part of the Virgo Cluster, a group of galaxies just like the Local Group, except much larger. The Virgo Cluster contains about 1,500 galaxies and is over 15 million light years long. At 10 to the 24 meters away from Earth, we come across the anomaly known as the Great Attractor. See, objects with a lot of mass have a stronger gravitational pull. That's why planets have moons and you don't. They're a lot more massive than you are. However, the Great Attractor is a bit different. It's pulling clusters of galaxies towards it, but we can't observe or see what it is. It's an object with a mass tens of thousands of times larger than the Milky Way's, but we don't even know what it is. At 10 billion light years from Earth, we come across the largest known object in the universe, the Hercules Corona Borealis Great Wall. It's a bit of a mouthful, but rightfully so. Why? Because it physically should not exist. It is 10 billion light years long, 7 billion light years wide, and nearly 1 billion light years deep. This means that light would take 10 billion years to cross the entire wall only once. To put it into perspective, the universe is only 13.8 billion years old. In the time that Earth has been a planet, about 4.5 billion years, the light that has left the one end of the Great Wall hasn't even made it halfway to the other side yet. The structure is so big, it breaks laws of physics. There is something in the world of science known as the cosmological principle. To put it simply, it says, no matter where you are in the universe, if you look in any direction, you should see an even distribution of matter. This, in turn, creates a limit for the sizes of objects. It's about 1.2 billion light years, meaning that this structure is 8 times the supposed limit of the largest object possible. And at 10 to the 27 meters away from Earth, we reach the outer limits of the observable universe. This is as far as we can go and most likely will ever be able to. And thus, our journey ends. Just 27 steps ago, we were back at Earth, back at life as we know it. But the most amazing thing to me is that we traveled to the outer limits of our universe as we know it, reaching the largest structures known in the entire universe, and it only took us 27 steps. 27 orders of magnitude. But in order to travel to the tiniest limits known to man, at the Planck length, we have to take 35 steps backwards from the human level. This means that we are 8 orders of magnitude, or about 100 million times larger compared to the smallest thing there is, than the universe is compared to us. And that, I find, is the most interesting thing of them all.
You are not in the universe. You are the universe. And in this brief, beautiful moment, you're awake, taking it all in. So anytime you feel bad or feel as though you haven't done enough, remember that you are much more than you think.
Recently, I was scrolling through old pictures, and I found the picture from when I was a little kid. I took the picture and held it up to my face in front of a mirror, and I realized, wow, I look nothing like that kid in the picture. We don't have the same physical properties. Our thoughts, ideas, and beliefs are different, and we certainly don't have the same memories. But still, I know it's me. My brain sees the picture and creates a storyline that I was there, I am here, and I'll be somewhere else in the future, looking back doing the same exact thing. This is the idea of self. The idea that there's something deep within us that remains fundamentally the same even when everything else changes. It's the idea that we can grow bigger, create new memories, lose old memories, change our thoughts and beliefs. But deep down, there's still something that remains fundamentally unchanged. The idea of self is one that has baffled pretty much everyone, scientists and philosophers alike, for centuries. Because as easy as it is to describe, understanding why or how it works sits on the opposite end of the spectrum. As humans, we experience a lot of different senses. We feel